Hi, everyone. This is Nate Moore with selfconcept.com, and I have Kat Jennings with us today. She is a fellow Self Concept Coaching Level 2 member. Hey, Kat, how are you?
Hey,
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Serenity, about a really special transformation that you just did. Kat, is that right? Can you tell us a
yes,
little bit about it?
absolutely. So, I've suffered in the past with anxiety,
Hmm.
and I worked with Vincent
Yeah.
on this transformation, and we did lay some groundwork. There was some preliminary groundwork, but the most of the work was um, self-concept
Hmm.
model, um, and it was a transformation of serenity.
Yeah.
And what has happened over the course of must be 2 weeks now,
Hmm.
I don't get upset. Now, I still have a few triggers I'd like to remove,
Sure.
or things that cause me to have an internal dialogue that I no longer want. So I'm going to do some work there.
Yeah.
But what's funny is while I'll still have an unresourceful internal dialogue, it doesn't get me stuck,
Wow.
and it doesn't trigger anxiety. It doesn't
Oh, wow.
trigger um what used to happen was anxiety and then depression and then anger, or anxiety then anger then depression. Would have those three, and they all kind of collaborate to make my life really, really fun sometimes. So, the spice variety is the spice of life. So, I can't really recommend it. But since we transformed Serenity,
Mm-hmm.
I can, in the presence of an internal dialogue that tells me all of the worst case scenarios, it's very kind that way. It gives me a heads up about all the worst case scenarios that could ever happen to me at any given moment. I just wish it was more accurate. It's never been accurate. But even in the face of this litany of worst case scenarios that run through my mind, as you can see, I can laugh about it, and I can be serene about it. I can gain perspective about it. From serenity, I can go into curiosity if I want. From serenity, if I really need to, I can go into action.
Wow.
From the crash state that I was getting from listening to my worst case scenarios, I wasn't going anywhere.
Sure.
so so I don't know if that answers your
It
question.
it does. That's really awesome. Now, what if you were to describe Serenity? How would you describe it from your experience?
I am much more likely
Hmm.
to just be in awe of nature. I work outside,
Yeah.
and I can watch, you have snowy white egrets where you live too, so you know what I'm talking about. I can watch on the site right in front of me. I can watch a snowy white egret land and sit there
Yeah.
and do whatever he's going to do, and I can pay attention to that
Hmm.
and just feel something if I want, if I think that it's beautiful, and feel something. Or if I don't want, I can just not feel something. I don't think until 2 weeks ago I ever not felt something, or
Wow.
not felt something big.
Wow.
I may still feel something if somebody asks me a question about the sensations in my body, but what it's done for me is I don't have big feelings in my body that I then give big meanings in my mind to. I'm far less likely to give sensations in my body stories.
Interesting.
Up until 2 weeks ago, I could create a major story about a minor tingle. If I had any sensation in my body, it had a backstory that's 20 years old and was going to end in death. I mean, that's...
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Serenity is I don't do that anymore.
That's so good. Oh, oh, that's so good.
I have so many talents that I could be using for something else. I could probably write 3 screenplays and design a bridge based on the stories that I'm not.
Absolutely. What do you think would like by the way, I think that's one I'm going to work on here pretty soon. Thanks for that inspiration. If somebody else was in the group and they're like thinking about qualities, how do you think about it, or when would you recommend Serenity for someone?
Well, 20 years ago, I would recommend Serenity to everyone 20 years ago. But if you didn't transform Serenity 20 years ago, ideally you would have your top 3 values already transformed, their qualities that track that support those values. That I would hope that we are supporting our top 3 values first.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of asterisks that I would put to that.
Yeah.
First is, if you have a thing in your life that has to be done or would make 20 minutes from now better, let's do the quality that supports the next 20 minutes.
Nice.
And then next week we'll do the value that supports your highest, the quality that supports your highest value.
Yeah.
But if you've got a thing today that can make 20 minutes from now better, let's go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Serenity, I'm surprised I didn't think to do that a while ago, because Serenity is going to support everything. I have kind of a list of qualities that I like to make sure that people have. Serenity's now on it. But top of the pops is compassion, gratitude. And when I say compassion, when we make a list of your major life contexts, I want to see that you put yourself when you're transforming compassion. I want yourself, and I want the first and the worst to be about yourself. The times that you were not compassionate to you. We've got to get that under control. And then I would say gratitude is underestimated and hard for a lot of us. And I like to transform love, loving, lovable all at once. And you got to have that. Peace, collaboration, understanding, productivity, consistency, and integrity. And then you should probably just be a good person after I've done all that.
I bet.
Probably just take a lot of action after I've done all that. The other thing is, I like to start a session by figuring out if this is a thing that a person needs a strategy for. a lot of times qualities require a strategy, and the person might not have the strategy that makes them feel really safe having that quality. So a lot of times I like to future pace. I like to write out a strategy and future pace a strategy a
Can you give me
bunch
an
of
example?
times.
Can
Yes. So I recently worked with someone who wanted to be reflective.
Mhm.
And I like to ask, what do you want?
Mhm.
And I like to ask, tomorrow when you are Q,
Mhm.
what do you see? What do you hear?
Mhm.
What do you feel? What are you doing?
Mhm.
And if I don't immediately see a light behind their eyes and they're doing it, I know we need to come up with a strategy.
Interesting.
So I do a task analysis like I used to do when I was a teacher, and I break down the tasks. And then I future pace them doing these tasks a bunch of times. I'm like NLP future, like we're doing it fast. Like it's like I do like a Richard Bandler kind of machine kind of, and we run through it and we run through it and we run through it. I guess kind of like a new behavior generator kind of thing.
Okay.
But with my own flavor. I flavor the gumbo how I flavor the gumbo. So so I like to start there.
Mhm.
And then I like to say, what is the reason that you aren't already Q? And then I like to say, well, what's the positive intention of that? Then I do a values elicitation, and then I do what Connie Ray Andreas would say, I reverse the outcome chain.
Yeah, interesting.
And then that's fertile ground. It's so much easier to do a transformation from there
Mm.
because you're not going to get any objections from anybody after that. I dare you. I'm a teacher. You going to tell me no? No, I'm joking. But yeah, I mean, it just goes. It just the level, but that the level of trust between the person and themselves is just so much better because they're starting to see themselves as the person who is Q, as
Sure.
the person who deserves Q,
Sure.
as the person who embodies Q, and then Q has space to have examples.
Yeah.
And I really like to then have, I like to see for myself, and
Mhm.
so far everybody I've worked with can do this,
Mhm.
my timeline, and I just talk to them about my timeline in front of me. And I say, I imagine that I'm flying over New Orleans in a plane, and that my timeline looks just like New Orleans at night when I fly over in a plane. And as I fly along the river in a plane, I notice the lights. And as I notice the lights, I know those lights represent examples in my life of when I was Q.
Yeah.
And if you notice in just a moment that the lights that represent the examples of Q, it's very easy for them to light up.
Sure.
And suddenly your subconscious mind is noticing that you have been Q your whole life. And all of these lights along the Mississippi River that is your timeline are now representing Q. And in a second, in just a moment, it's very, very bright down there. And the whole thing is qualities. And then we talk about what their database looks like now. Because otherwise I'm pulling teeth, man. And I'm not.
that's that's really great. What?
Has this worked for everybody? Everybody so far, I don't work with enough people to know. But I like giving people positive momentum and the idea that it's that easy for them to have that many examples. And then we'll talk about the submodalities and how by just knowing what the submodalities are of cue makes it very easy to bring more cues, that the submodalities all just kind of attract the examples like that, because it gives us an indication. And then I like to front load the future.
Excellent. That's go ahead.
Because from there we have some juice. And once we have that juice, that power, that like, oh yeah, I'm starting to get it. My mind is now primed for cue. And I haven't even begun to talk about the times that we weren't cue yet. And we've got all this cue, we've got all the cue big guns lined up in a row.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, you know what happens to me? Every time I think of myself as a quality, it's really the thing to do that I think, oh yeah, but that time that I wasn't, that was a hot mess. So let's talk about what our options are for there. So do you think that you have about 5 to 10% of your database as counterexamples? And then we see, do we really want to transform a lot of this? Because if we have 5 to 10% counterexamples, we talk about the ramifications of 5 to 10% counterexamples being integrated into the database and how that makes us feel. And we look to see how that makes us feel as they're integrated. And I only transform what won't integrate and what makes people uncomfortable.
That makes sense.
Because if we're looking at our timeline full of lights of examples, a lot of people are going to be on board with me for that.
Sure.
If we're looking how we can make ourselves look into the future as this, a lot of people are going to be on board with me on that. And then we only worry about transforming the counterexamples, and we started with the objections. Like if you have anything that you want to talk about, we started with that. And we did a parts negotiation with that in the beginning. So I'm getting a lot of really good results. I'm getting a lot of people say that it goes really smoothly and it lasts a long time.
Well, I'm glad to hear. That's awesome. That's really great. What kind of advice would you give someone who's just kind of getting started, and let's say somebody was new, and a lot of the things that you mentioned, which is some great advice, they didn't quite know what to do with that, and because they're just that new, right? What would you say to them?
I would say congratulate yourself every time you notice a new submodality, and practice noticing submodalities.
Yeah.
And know that we all have trouble with some submodalities, and that we all have submodalities that just hit us over the head. And congratulate yourself for both of that and everything in between. And notice how useful noticing your submodalities are all the time. And talk to yourself about what it's like to think of the world in terms of submodalities. And as you notice these things, you'll notice that it becomes easier and easier for you to build these skills one on top of the other. And so once you have the submodalities, play with your database. Is your database serving you? When I first started this book, before I joined the group, I read this book twice. I thought these people were lying. I thought they were lying. Because, no one told me that those people are all master practitioners in NLP.
Right.
Because their ability to talk about submodalities in such rich language was what was a barrier to me. It's just like, I don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? I don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I read the book and they talked about how you organize your database,
Mm-hmm.
my database used to look like this. It was a movie right here,
Mm-hmm.
and it would come in from behind. Thank God Damon helped me. He put it right here. So like that's the first thing he did. So it was a movie, and it was one movie after another, sequential, and it was making me really unsteady. So I read the book, and it said something about a Rolodex, and I said, I could do one better. So I made a Rolodex right here, and I put all of my movies on SD cards.
Nice.
And I put the SD cards in there, and I color coded them based on the length of time and any other information that I need. There's some different information. So when I look over here, I can see thousands of examples over here anytime I want to, because I have the end, and it's just like this really great organization. So when you realize that you have a jagged emotion, when you feel like you're not just having a regular ambiguous quality, but you feel like this about a quality, like, oh my God, this time I was like this, and that's, and you're panicking. Do it like this, like a thing that you can see, so that you get real information out of it as soon as you see it, because that evens those emotions out. And integrating submodality and integrating counterexamples helps a lot. I wish that I was that person whose counterexamples were already integrated, because I feel like I would feel a lot better in general. And Vincent has encouraged me not to create a machine that just puts them all in, because he says that could make ambiguous qualities weaker. But I may try it and see what it's like for a week. And I may try it and see what it's like for a week. But yeah, because we can always undo. Yeah. But so playing with your submodalities, playing with your database, playing with someone else. You got to play with someone else. If you're sitting by yourself, if you're watching this and you're sitting by yourself and you've never practiced with anyone, make a friend. There is someone out there that is lonely and needs your help.
Sure. Yeah.
Make a friend, play with a friend, and show up to the calls.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Well, that's all great advice, Kat. I sure do appreciate you joining me on this call. If anyone ever has any questions in the group, Kat's always been very supportive to everyone there, so I definitely encourage you to reach out. And other than that, I hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.